Tim, Boashes, Idikwi, Kwa. These are Creole phrases from the tiny island of St. Lucia in the Caribbean. We use or we say these phrases when we're about to give a riddle or tell a story. Today I'm going to start off with the first video in a series where I use traditional Creole proverbs and dig into them. I'm hoping that when I say these proverbs that the origins or other cultures or people who see those videos can write to me and say, well, we have that same proverb in our culture as well. The idea for these videos basically is that I use something from the Creole culture of St. Lucia, a tiny island in the Caribbean near Martinique and St. Vincent, and then I try and situate it historically or dig into it. It is a knowledge-seeking mission for me, as well as me bringing things out there that can probably pique some interest with some people. So the proverb that we're going to be using today or talking about today is called, in Creole, this is how it goes. Le bab kamawadi kudifi guzisa. I will repeat that again. In Creole of St. Lucia, the proverb goes like this. Le bab kamawadi kudifi guzisa. So I'm going to translate this proverb. Le bab means when the beard or your comrades beard. So le bab kamawadi. When your comrades beard or your friend's beard catches on fire, you should begin to douse your own beard with water. So basically, the proverb le bab kamawadi kudifi ruze sawi means if you notice that your friend's or your comrade's beard spontaneously combusts or catches on fire, you should begin to douse your very own beard with water. When you notice that something like that happens, which is a strange event, wouldn't you say? So someone notices that their friend's beard spontaneously combusts. So the proverb goes, if that ever happens, what you should do is immediately begin to wet your beard, because that is definitely an unusual event. So now that I have explained the proverb that we are going to be using today, what we're going to do to discuss this proverb is to look into the recently, because today is the 4th of August 2023, and what's been in the news is Niger and the coups in Niger. So what we're going to look at is coups and the spreading of coups or uprising in the Sahel region in Africa, which I find that this proverb le bab kamawadi kudifi aptly discusses or situates it. In other words, if you notice that there's a coup going on or somebody is overthrown, vulnerable governments or people who can get overthrown, they should begin to start doing things to prevent their governments from being overthrown or their countries from having a coup. So I basically looked online and I found a very interesting article from BBC News. It is dated the 28th of July, and they're discussing the histories of coups in Africa. So it is said there that there have been a history of coups since independence in Africa up to 2023. And while people may believe that there are more coups going on right now, there were actually more coups between the years 1960 and 1969. And then there was also a lot in 1970 and 1979, and a lot in 1990 and 1999. As a matter of fact, 2010 and 2019, that decade, and 2020 and 2023 have had less coups than those previous decades that I mentioned. Quite interesting. But what we should try and understand is, what are the reasons for these things happening? Now, I am not an expert on that, although I have a bachelor's degree in international development and global studies, so I find these topics very interesting. And this channel is basically called Trade Winds of the Golden Triangle. So it looks at, for example, things situated within the trading area of the Caribbean and that area, but look at the idea of the Golden Triangle, of the trades and international or the original globalization which took place during the time of slavery and sugarcane and cotton. But back to the idea of coups in the Sahel region. So it says there that in the year between 20 and 2021, these countries, Chad, Mali, Guinea, Sudan and Niger, they all saw coups. So basically, les babes comment on the coup. Whenever Burkina Faso, Guinea, there was a coup. Then we're finding out now Niger recently has overthrown. So it suffices to say that the countries in and around the area, the rest of the countries, should start putting their houses in order. Because it looks like the canary built has spontaneously combusted with fire. So they should begin to douse the oven with water to prevent these builds from catching on fire. Or in other words, to prevent coups from spreading all over Africa in any governments that are unstable. But what I'd like to say is very interesting that after independence, it seemed that there was a lot of uprising in the people. And there are many different reasons, I would say, that you may have a coup. Some coups are fomented or sponsored by outside influences. For example, in the Caribbean, we do not have many resources that foreign interests might have reasons to foment coup or foment destabilization or back one government or the other which supports them or not. So we've been able to have relatively stable governments for a long time since independence from our former colonial masters like France and England. But in Africa it's a different thing. It seems like what's called the resource curse or having abundant resources causes that there to be interest from outside influences, be it foreign governments or multinationals, who have interest in securing rights or access to certain minerals. So that gives them ample reason to want to, for example, have an influence or have their man in power or somebody which is sympathetic to their cause in the seat of government. But it seems now, over the last couple of years, they've been having what are called popular coups, almost like what happened in the Arab Spring, in which the generations now are overthrowing the long-lasting rulers or rulers that have been there for many years in this country and somehow have been accused of doing the bidding of the foreign governments or multinationals. And the younger people are coming in and saying, well, we don't seem to be benefiting from all those resources that we have in the country, so the best thing to do would be to get rid of those governments and put in governments that are going to be more popular for the people or help the people. Whether that's going to happen or not is a different story. But it seems like when people like Thomas Sankara and other people were overthrown, it was done because of outside interests. So coups were fomented by foreign governments like, the Alphabet Boys or foreign influence. But the coups nowadays seems to be popular coups fomented by internal people who want to get rid of those governments who seem to be doing the bidding of foreign governments or multinationals. So this is where we are at. It says here that over the history since 1952, Burkina Faso has had 10 coups, Benin 8, Sudan has had 17, Burundi 11, Ghana 10, Guinea-Bissau 9, and Sierra Leone 10. There are others that have had. Comoros has had 9. In the Caribbean, we've had a coup in Trinidad, and there's been one in Grenada, and there was an invasion of Grenada at that time when that coup happened. But basically, the idea of coups spreading in Africa is apt when we're discussing this idea of this, not a riddle, but a proverb which we find in the Creole culture, which states, when your comrades' build spontaneously catches on fire, you should immediately begin to wet your own for fear that it tout will catch on fire. In Creole it is le bab comment on depuis il fait, you should bouser ça. Le bab comment depuis il fait, bouser ça. So here we go. The idea of using proverbs. If this proverb is also familiar for you from wherever you're from, do write me and tell me. That way you can situate it, because in the Caribbean and Creole culture, it's an influence of African, European and native Canary cultures, but it's also a learning journey when I make those videos, hoping to get some feedback from you, the audience out there. So if you like it, hit the like button, please do subscribe, so you can grow the channel and I can bring you a lot more. So I will be using some other proverbs on the next one and bringing you another video. See you around.